Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Well, hey, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. I feel like I say the same thing every single time.
You do.
I noticed this, like, whenever I record, like, our little takeaway for our worship team, I always say the same thing, like, over and over. So if you go back and listen to the beginning of them, it's always the same. It's kind of like...
That's what's fun about not being the host.
Yeah.
I don't have to say the same thing.
Well, and I don't feel challenged to have to come up with something new every single week.
I think it's good practice to welcome people to what they're at.
Welcome. Welcome, Scott.
Well, thanks.
You're here. Hey, so earlier in the day, like I was kind of showing you some, and you and I got into a conversation about AI, about just how it's like, it feels like it's literally exploded like the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because Will was preparing something for the people over at Harmony.
Yeah.
And he gave it a prompt for like a question that he had or that some information.
Yeah.
And it
knew its Bible very good.
Yeah.
It did. He was asking, and then it would like in the. So I think he started out by asking like, "Hey, tell me the story of when Peter denied Jesus 3 times," or something like that. He started out just with that, and I think this was on Snapchat, this new like thing, and then like shot back to him the story of Peter, and then it even started adding like commentary to it, like, man, this is about how God shows redemption, and on and on and on, and so then Will texted back to this bot and said, "What other stories of redemption are like this in the Bible?" And it came back, it was like this story, this story, this story. One of them was Lazarus. So Will's like, "Awesome, tell me the story of, not Lazarus, Zacchaeus."
Yeah.
He said, "Please tell me the story of Zacchaeus." And then it shot back that. And like he's sitting there having a conversation, and like this thing is responding like really, really well to all these like biblical questions.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's really neat.
Yeah. I was in one of the groups that I'm in on Facebook. They have this art. They have a bunch of different art generators that are powered by artificial intelligence, and so some people were posing the question of, what does this look like for the church? And because my phone does a really good job. If you hear something in the background, they're doing construction on on the wing of the church. But if you can't hear it, it's all right. But anyways, but my phone was doing a good job of, like tracking like what like conversations that I'm doing. And so like on my For You page on TikTok, I came across this account, and it's the AI Bible Official, or you could just type in the AI Bible. And it's really cool because this artist, what he does is he types in the scripture of like the way that it's described, like of all these different events in the Bible, and AI generates what it would look like, or what the intelligence think that it would look like. So they do all these other ones with like these Jesus walking on water, and the burning bush, and them casting their fish nets on the other side of the boat, and they've got like these ginormous fish nets that are just loaded with fish, and they can't even bring them in. And it's really cool because you and I we've been talking about the story of Moses and how to do it, or how to apply it to our lives, and how we can take it and see the correlation between that and the New Testament. And I came across this one where it was just the next topic on what we're talking about, and it's Mount Sinai. It's whenever Jesus meets Moses on there, and the description, and it's really cool. Like if you have TikTok, you should for sure search this up. It's really, really, really awesome. But the description, whenever Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, and this is before that God is going to give him the 10 Commandments, it talks about like these crazy things that are happening, like God coming down and cloud, and there's lightning, and there's fire, and all this other stuff. And then AI generated this image. And I showed it to you earlier, and you're like, wow, this is like really cool.
Yeah, those pictures were really neat.
It just gives you a visual of, sometimes like our minds are kind of limited, maybe creatively,
Yeah.
and I don't know, just seeing something like that, like it kind of puts things in scale and in comparison, and
They would have made good screensavers back in the day.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does have like that early 2000s kind of feel to it.
Yeah. It is really neat, though. Yeah, so we're hopping into
Yeah, that's where we're
Big
at.
Mo.
Is Moses? He's at the base of Mount Sinai. I'm gonna pull up the scripture here, and we're in Exodus chapter 19, and it says that Moses, and this starts in verse 3. It says, "Then Moses climbed the mountain to appear before God. The Lord called to him from the mountain, and said, 'Give these instructions to the family of Jacob. You've seen what I've seen. It's a testimony.'" I'm just paraphrasing. "You will obey and keep my covenant. You will be a special treasure among all the people on earth." And so what's happening during all of this is there is a thick cloud. This is Lord's telling Moses that there's going to be a thick cloud that's going to cover up the whole mountain. And he gives him kind of instructions as well to kind of says you need to set a border around the mountain. Nobody should come up or they're going to die. like you're the only one. And I'm reading through this, and so I have a question. I understand that like in the Holy of Holies, there's only certain people that can go in that. Is that almost kind of like a recreation of what is happening here, or is it because the temple hadn't yet been built?
Right. It's kind of like a precursor for it, because what's going to happen, we were saying this will probably be maybe what we cover next, is like there's now about to be a bunch of instructions after the 10 Commandments. Then Moses is going to go and get like the full law from the Lord.
Yeah.
And such. And it's kind of like a precursor to that. Like this is the manifest presence of God coming down in a sense. And that's what the Ark of the Covenant was in the Holy of Holies, is the manifest presence of God. And what you're dealing with there is the holiness of God and the purity of God. And the reason why there's these instructions of like, listen, the people cannot come close to the mountain.
Yeah.
They cannot, is because the people are sinful. And this is the whole story of the Bible that most people don't know, that this is the story of the Bible. Most of the time, if you were to ask people, what's the Bible all about? It's like, oh, well, Jesus died for my sins. Right? It's like, yeah, but there's something, there's a reason why that took place.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Jesus had to die for your sins. And it was all about the presence of God. Right? In the beginning, God is with his creation. Sin breaks that, and there's a chasm between us. And it's not that God doesn't want to be with his creation any longer. It's now that here is sin, and it is not that is the thing that keeps us at a distance from God.
Yeah.
And so like the reason why like the people had to stay back away from the mountain would be the same reason why the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies and everything would want, before the priest could come in, while there would have to be certain sacrifices and stuff. It was all about purification.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that, you miss the actual point of the Bible if you think that everything about, the Bible has to do with how Jesus died for your sins on the cross or whatnot. It's really about the presence of God. And so this presence that was here was so holy and so pure, the people had to stand back, away, because there had not yet been a sacrifice made that would allow the manifest presence of God to dwell in the midst of Israel yet, because we don't have the tent of meetings yet, which is going to come here in just a couple of chapters. We don't have the sacrificial system fully in place or anything like this. And so this is like God, the manifest presence of God, unfiltered, completely unbridled. Like this is it. This is
Yeah.
the big deal. And so it's like you can't come into that presence in a sinful state. The holiness would just knock you over, in a sense. And so as God is meeting with Moses, to have this discussion about, hey, I want you to go down and tell the people, I'm willing to make a covenant with them if they're willing to do what it is that I want them to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what Moses is going to have to do. He's going to go down the mountain, and he's going to ask them, hey, do you want to be in this covenant with this God? Do you want to be the people of this God? And they agree to this. They say in verse 8, we'll do everything the Lord has said. I skipped something I wanted to hit, though. Did you notice it's in verse... where'd it go? I just had it. There it is. In verse 6. Actually, verse 5. If you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you'll be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So even all the way back as far as this story is, and as far as the biblical timeline goes, God is telling his people, what you will be is a kingdom of priests.
Yeah.
Meaning you will be a people that have full access to the presence of God. Because that's what the priest did. The priests were the mediator between God and humanity. He says, the whole lot of you will be a kingdom full of people that have access to my presence. Now, we already know that wasn't true of Israel.
Yeah.
Because in the sense that what we're thinking. Because Israel had one single group that was the priest.
Yeah.
Which was the Levites.
Yeah.
So this is actually even foreshadowing even beyond the cross, because for God to have a full kingdom of priests, then there had to be a way that the presence of God could dwell with everyone that is part of this kingdom and not just one tribe that's part of the kingdom. So this whole promise of that you're going to be a holy nation, you're going to be a kingdom full of priests, you're going to be people that have access to the presence of God, is actually what Christ accomplished on the cross, bringing that. Again, we were just talking about how the whole story of the Bible is actually about how God wants to be present with his people.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And he's already foreshadowing this all the way back in Exodus 19, that one day I'm going to make a way to where not just the Levites once a year have access to my presence. And not just will you carry around this box that is symbolic of my presence, in which I will dwell, but there will be all these rules and all these things that still keep you at a distance. The same as the people are kept at a distance at the mountain.
Yeah.
One day there's going to be something that's going to take place on a mountain that now you will be able to have access to the presence of God. And it's like what the writer of Hebrews talks about, like you'll be able to boldly come into the presence of God without fear, without shame, without guilt, and it will be all because of what Christ has done on the cross that'll make the way for that. And so all of that whole story is wrapped up in what's going on here.
Yeah, it's such a unique little bit of information to extract from that, because most people don't think about that. They don't think about the laws that were put in place that only certain people can go and be in the presence of the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, even if you grab anybody that's been in church most of their life and you ask them to read that, they're not going to extract that from that scripture. But that's the truth that's found in it.
There's going to be a whole kingdom of priests. And then you go, well, wait a second. All of Israel wasn't the priest. Only the Levites were. So this must be pointing past to something else. That this promise here is going to be good for the people of God long past this temporary setup of what's going on. Because all these laws that are getting ready to come, like people get so bent out of shape about these laws. And like some people try to act like, oh, well, you should still follow these laws. And then other people are like, oh, just throw the laws away. It doesn't matter. Just go to the New Testament. And then some people just read it and they're like, what's God's deal? Right? why is he so particular about this and that? And it's like, listen, all you have to understand is what God wanted more than anything was to dwell in the midst of his people. And he needed a faithful, obedient people to be able to do that because of the way that sin creates distance between him and his creation. And so all of these sacrifices, like when we get to Leviticus, and that's where I'm at in my personal reading plan right now, which it is a hard thing to read through, to be honest, because
I mean, because it talks about everything,
it's
like
just
everything.
so minute. But what we're seeing is just like Moses here on this mountain, the people have to stay back. If God was ever going to dwell in the midst of Israel, which is what he wanted to do, certain regulations had to be kept. So all of those rules and all the laws and stuff that are getting ready to come through the end of Exodus and throughout the vast majority of Leviticus, it's all about how do we make sure that the manifest presence of God can stay in the middle of Israel.
Yeah.
They're actually more about purification and like making a way for God to be present more so than like, oh, that lamb's getting punished for sin.
Yeah.
Right? Like these are yes, but it's more the bigger macro story is, well, if you want God to live in the midst of Israel, these are the things that has to happen. So the way there is a purity that is maintained, so the way the presence of God could be in our midst, which ultimately will get like, and the reason why like we're not sitting here like, oh, you're not allowed to wear 50-50 cotton blend, cotton polyester blend shirts and all these different laws that people just go and extract from Leviticus and go like, oh, see, why don't you follow this? Well, the reason why is eventually there was a new way for the manifest presence of God to come and dwell with me.
Yeah.
And that's through what Christ did on the cross, and then on the day of Pentecost, now the Spirit is with me. Now God, because of what Christ did on the cross, has exactly what he wanted.
Yeah.
I should, maybe not exactly what he wanted. This is still an imperfect situation in the fact that one day, in the new heavens and the new earth, there will be a complete absence of sin to where God can finally and fully dwell with his people in his creation. And so when you see Moses up on this mountain and this swirling storm is taking place and all of this is going on and the people can't get close to the mountain, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Is the presence of God is meeting with Moses, and it's so holy, it's so precious that like certain things had to be followed.
There's a bit of scripture here that just made me laugh because at the beginning of the chapter it's like Moses went up to the mountain and God told him what to do. And so he came down and so he told him to set the boundary. Nobody should touch this. And so he's preparing them, getting them consecrated, wash your clothes, don't do this, make sure that this happens, just giving them all these things. And so on the third day of all this happening, he goes back up, climbs up the mountain again, and then God goes, hey, Moses, go back down and tell the people, don't. He's like, I just came from there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what I would have done.
Tell them again because it's that big of a deal.
That's why I'm thinking, like, I wonder if God was testing Moses with, like, let's see if his patience is really full today.
Yeah.
Could you imagine climbing a mountain, somebody go, hey, go back down and grab this for me really quick and come back up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially what God is doing. So.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I found it funny because I was frustrated for Moses reading that. But, and then he says, go down and bring Aaron back up with you. Don't let the priest break through the barrier to approach the Lord, or he will break out and destroy them. So Moses went down to the people and told them what the Lord had said. And then this point in the story is where this is where God gives the 10 Commandments the first time to Moses. And one of the things that I find interesting about the 10 Commandments, because I mean, we can go through them, but one of the things I find interesting about it is because there's a lot of people, you kind of alluded to it earlier, is that there's a lot of people that say, well, this is Old Testament. I don't need to follow these commandments.
Yeah.
And I need to just follow whatever the New Testament is saying. Jesus said, love the Lord your God and love other people. And like that's that's the way I need to live.
Yeah.
And I think that even Jesus, he even said, he's like, yes, you should. In a different instance, he's like, you should honor your father and mother, but there's other things as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what happens is the Ten Commandments end up breaking down into the two greatest commandments that Jesus focused on.
Yeah.
That's actually what. Like, so when Jesus says, so the teacher of the law comes up, teacher, what is the greatest, most important law? And he responds, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is equally as important, love your neighbor as yourself. What a lot of people miss is that is the Ten Commandments, right? Because the first four commandments have to deal with our love for God,
Yeah.
that it has to be supreme. This is why, like, and people get like so bent out of shape about this, the fact that like, you shall have no other gods before me, and they're like, wow, why does God have such an ego that like you can't have any other? And it's like, well, again, because God's desire is to be with you. If you have other gods, which would be false gods, that are going to lead you into sin, then He can't be with you.
Yeah.
That's it's not an ego thing; it's a presence thing.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want the manifest presence of God to dwell with you? Because if so, then you can't allow your idols to lead you into sin.
Yeah.
Because then the manifest presence of God can't come. So, like, again, it's now. Could God have an ego and say, like, no, listen, I am the only God, so therefore you should not have no other gods before me? Of course, He would be well within His rights to do that, because He is the only true God. But like the first four, all have to do with loving God supremely and making sure that you are creating an environment in which He can dwell. Don't make for yourself an image in the form of anything. So no idols. Don't misuse the name of the Lord your God. Again, that's all about loving God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. That is a whole day dedicated to just loving God.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going on there.
Yeah.
That's what's going on with that. The first four of those is when Jesus says the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second is equally like it, love your neighbor as yourself. That's when you get into number 5, honor your father and mother. Don't murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Don't give false testimony. Do not covet your neighbor's house. These are like all the like big categories of ways that you can harm someone else.
Yeah.
And the Lord goes, okay, you're not supposed to do those. And so Jesus then echoes them back again when He's asked, what is the greatest commandment? Love God with all that you have. But the second is equally as important, which we can see it's always been equally as important, because
Yeah.
Israel was to create a community that supremely loved God and supremely loved other people. It's
Yeah.
the same thing. But what it is for Jesus, he's not making a specific thing like this, because now what we are expected to do through the power of the Holy Spirit is, again, to love our neighbor as ourself,
Yeah.
to love those that are difficult to love. And so we don't need specific rules if we're really thinking about it. All we need is, what does love require of me? I don't. If my goal is to love, I don't need you to tell me not to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And in fact, in all these different situations, when Jesus talked about them, He always upped the ante on it, right? Like Israel thought, oh man, what an accomplishment to go all day without killing someone, because that's the command. But Jesus goes, you know what? Actually, if you have hate in your heart for someone, you've already murdered them
Yeah.
in your heart. So He goes, so it went like, so that's why it wasn't like, oh, the command not to kill. Of course you shouldn't kill. But now Jesus is calling us to an even higher plane of love that goes, you shouldn't even hate. And like he says the same thing about lust.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've lusted after someone, you've already committed adultery, whether or not you actually went through with
the
it.
Israelites.
or
I
not.
went all day without cheating on
I didn't
my
cheat
wife.
on my wife. Pat me on the back. It's like, yeah, let's live at a higher standard of love now.
Yeah.
Now what Jesus is trying to do is not just get your outward actions to be one thing. He's actually trying to change what you want to do and
Yeah.
not just what you do. But they're completely consistent, right? There's 4 that have to do with loving God. There's 6 that have to do with loving others. It's
Yeah.
the same thing Jesus was talking about, but Jesus is just calling us to an even higher level of love because the revelation of God to humanity was always in accordance with the level of truth that current society was already living in.
Yeah.
That's why, like, people that look at the Old Testament law and are turned off by the fact that there's still allowances for slaves and stuff like that, it's because God couldn't take people that lived 4,000 years ago and take them to how we live now. That's an absurd way to bring about progress in humanity. You
Yeah.
can't go from 0 to 60. So he took whatever was the prevailing culture around them and made it moderately better. And then the next time that he did it, made it moderately better to where it fit into the cultural context in which those people were living. He wasn't like, how crazy would that be, like, for him to try to take us from here to there, just in a snap? Like, these people would have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah, it would be incredibly difficult. I mean, it's just being a pastor, you understand how difficult it is just to change minor things within the church
Yeah.
culturally. If we want to be a church of prayer, we can't just say, "All right, today, everybody, you got to spend an hour a day
Yeah.
today, or for the rest of your life, every single day, an hour in prayer." Like, yes, like that's awesome to be able to encourage someone, but it has that type of lifestyle has to be kind of like ingrained and taught, and just
Yes.
like over time, and it's. Have you ever heard stories about like whenever they would go to like I'm a big history nut, and so anytime that they had to direct big battleships or aircraft carriers, it would take them half the day to say if they had to turn back around to go to something, just because it took forever
It takes
to
a
get
long
it
time.
to
yes.
get it positioned in the area that
Yeah.
it needs to go, and it's such a slow and arduous process. That's the
Yeah,
same thing,
so-
same way it is with changing culture. It's
Exactly.
just you have to
And that's
do
what
it in very small
that's what
increments.
people are not thinking critically on this when they go like, well, why did they not just go ahead and take it all the way? And it's like, I mean, just think about that.
Yeah,
I mean, people 4,000 years ago, how they were living, and you think that they should be living the way that we are living right now?
yeah,
Right? That's absurd. Like, the principles clearly are still the same, but they have to fit into the amount of truth that the people currently have and the level of knowledge that the people currently have.
yeah,
That is just like it just that is only what makes sense. Like, people that go like, oh, God should have just outlawed slavery right there from the beginning. It's like, he could have done that. It probably wouldn't. It would have confused the people a lot more. Rather, what he did was he made Israel treat slaves better than the rest of the world, and for that they were able to stand out as the light of the world by being moderately better, but still fitting into the time period in which this revelation is coming,
yeah,
which is just the common sense way that of course a common sense God would do things in a common sense manner. And so, but the 10 Commandments, they're still represented in the New Testament through what Jesus says. Because when it comes to the Old Testament law, people always want to know what of the Old Testament is still binding on Christians today, and it would be, well, any of it that it gets repeated in the New Testament is what is binding today.
yeah,
So, like, all the 10 Commandments still clearly apply because Jesus said to love God, and he said to love your neighbor as yourself,
Yeah.
which is all encompassed there. Because there's no way that you could say, oh, I've got an idol in my life, but I love God with all that I have. It's like, nope, you're falling short in that area,
yeah,
and you can't commit murder and claim that you're loving your neighbor as yourself, right? So, like, they're all still there. At least these are. But again, what we were talking about earlier, now a lot of the laws and stuff that we're getting into in Leviticus and stuff had more to do with setting Israel apart from the other nations, but also about creating a community in which the manifest presence of God could dwell before the cross,
Yeah.
which is why post-cross they're no longer necessary. It's why God doesn't care if you wear a 50-50 cotton polyester blend anymore, or if you want to boil a goat in its mother's milk, he's not going to get real fussy with you, because that all had to do with what was going on pre-cross, whereas it's different post-cross. But like the stuff like the Ten Commandments shows back up into the ethic of the New Testament church from the very words of Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like when people are wondering what to do with all these different laws, that if you're reading through the Old Testament right now, that's it. That's how you figure out what's like. So how does God feel about marriage, right? Because marriage was settled in the Old Testament, but okay, then what did God say about it in the New Testament? Jesus is pretty clear on what his stance is on marriage in the New Testament. Comes right from his mouth. So we understand that the ethic that was put forth for marriage in the Old Testament has remained the same because Jesus repeated it
Yeah.
for us there. But like, you don't see Jesus going around going, oh, sorry, you can't wear this certain kind of shirt, and you can't plant 2 different types of seeds in this field. Like, these were the laws that Israel had to follow.
Kind of still hung up on that boiling a goat in its mother's milk. Like, I wonder if people still do that, and God goes, "Come on, guys, just stop that."
There's a really, really neat book called "Is God a Moral Monster" by Paul Copan that actually goes through all that weird Old Testament stuff that we go like, okay, God,
Yeah.
seriously, what's your problem with like shellfish? Seriously,
Yeah.
like what? Why you got to call certain fish and certain animals unclean? Like, what's the deal? He goes through like these like explanations for them, and it's so good.
What's the name of the book? One
It's
more
called
time.
"Is God a Moral Monster?"
Is God a moral monster?
Yeah, he deals with like what happened with like the overtaking of Canaan by the Israelites. Why, like, when modern sensibilities are very much offended by that story, because it looks like the Bible is condoning genocide.
Yeah.
But then again, is it really? And are you an Old Testament scholar to say that that's really what's going on? Most of the people that talk about it are not Old Testament scholars
Yeah.
and actually have no idea how to read the Hebrew text whatsoever. And most of them probably haven't actually read it. Either they've heard about it, and so their
Yeah.
modern sensibilities are offended by it, and it just doesn't make any sense. But so he covers stuff like that, but then he does get into some of the different laws and stuff about how they fit into the overarching character of God. It's a really really brilliant book.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out for sure.
I need to reread it. It's been such a long time. I was actually thinking of it recently. I need to reread it.
Is there a possible sermon series that you could pull out of that?
Oh yeah, I don't know how. Honestly, it's one of those deals. I don't know how interesting it would be, because I'm probably in the minority of people that actually care
Yeah.
about stuff like that. I think most people just go like, God doesn't have an issue with shellfish anymore, but like, no, he's cool with that post cross. They're like, all right, that's enough for me, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the minority of like nerdy, like I want to know why God did that in the first place.
Well, it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
And so I think that we should look at things almost kind of like critically, like, okay, like, why is this here? Like, I understand it's part of the Pentateuch, and like, this is what like the Jews hold, hold near and dear to their heart, but like there's got to be a reason, like, why. And I'd be interested.
Yeah, that book is really neat. I might do it with my book club at some point, but
Ooh,
I can't
that'd
do
be
it this
good.
fall because I'm finally going to do one of the books this fall that I've wanted to do for a long time. We're doing the Screw Tape Letters this fall.
Oh, I thought you were
book
still
club.
staying in the Bible. I was going to say Philemon.
No. This walk through Revelation on Wednesday nights
Trying
has
to find the
been
most
a
random
lot.
book.
So no, we're going to do Screw Tape Letters this fall in book club. It's going to be really fun.
Oh yeah,
But I could see Is God a Moral Monster being one of them we do next year maybe.
that would be good. I'd do it. I'd go through it.
It's fun.
Well, it's
All right.
it's time for your
Let's get it
favorite
over with.
your favorite time, dude. This thing is like getting pretty. It's been pretty low for a while, but I feel like every single week it's like scraping the bottom of the barrel with these questions. We need some new questions for sure. All right, mystery meat time. Drum roll, please. Not really. Where would you like to time travel? Back to the past or to the future? You only get to go to one, and then you're there for a little bit, and then you come back. I don't know the amount of time, but
I would go back.
yeah.
Yeah.
To punch that carrot that almost killed you.
I
I'll punch that carrot in the face.
don't know. I would go back to, I don't know. Any point before like 100 years ago would be so much fun to just go see.
What? You want to go see people with black plague? Like
Yeah.
that's pretty much what happened. Like
If
what?
I would be immune from it because I'm from the future and I have to go back to the future unplagued.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, any time before like
You just want
100
to go
years
see
ago.
people suffer.
No, I just think that like the 1920s always
Oh,
sounded
yeah.
like a really neat time in America.
Prohibition.
Or like just the what was it, the Roaring Twenties, flapper dresses and speakeasies, and it always seemed like the guys always wore suits and like always looked cool.
Are you wearing a suit to go back, or are you dressing like you are right now?
I don't know what the rules are.
I don't know what the rules are too. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to ask a question,
But
Scott.
like I don't know, seeing like
This is how we
certain-
fill time.
seeing certain battles of different wars,
Yeah.
or I don't know, they're just like I'm fascinated by like the first century since I've done so much study surrounding the first century.
Of America.
No, like
Or okay, gotcha.
yeah, like
Of like the
Roman
ever.
civilization.
I didn't know
early
if you were talking
church.
about like our first century as a country or the first century of the world.
No, like first century of the world, like seeing the Roman Empire. That would be just I don't know. It would all of that is very fascinating to me. I'm probably much more fascinated by the past than I am the future.
Yeah.
I don't care about like
Yeah, I don't care about flying cars or
I
if
don't
it
think
happens
that's
or
even
don't
gonna
happen.
happen.
And
I'm a pessimist when it comes to that. I don't think any of that Jetsons type stuff is.
you don't think they're
in the
going to be on
future.
Mars anytime soon?
I don't have a lot of like high hope for that.
I don't
But
know.
also like that. That's the type of stuff I just don't care. I know like some people that do, but like I just really don't.
Yeah.
Like you want to go live on Mars, well, just go ahead.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to outer space.
Yeah, I would go back in the past. I'd go back to that. I would probably go back and have you ever seen Deadpool whenever he goes back in the
Mm-mm.
future or goes back to the past, not Back to the Future because that's just the name of a movie, Back to the Past, and
No, I've never
he's
seen
sitting
Deadpool.
there in front of like baby Hitler's carriage and crib or whatever. He's like, "Oh, this is so hard, but I got to do it." Like he's talking about killing baby Hitler so he doesn't
Oh
go.
gosh, yeah. No, I've never seen that movie.
But I would go back and punch that chef that almost killed you by giving you that raw
yeah,
carrot.
See,
I'd go give that guy a visit. I would. I don't know. I don't know what I would do.
I don't know, like Oregon Trail type stuff.
I don't want to do that.
Gold, like the Gold Rush. All of this sounds very fun.
You don't like to do anything outside. How does that sound fun?
I don't know, but like back in the day, I feel like I would have. Yeah, I feel like I would have.
You wouldn't.
No, but I would have liked. Maybe what I'm saying is I would have liked to watch other people do it. That's what I'm really saying.
So like a real like, are you bringing popcorn with you? Just
Yes,
What is that guy doing over there? What's he eating? Why is he watching us?
yes.
You're
I just want to watch all that. Yeah.
Go get the gold as you eat your popcorn.
Yes,
you got
that
your
sounds-
nerds in your slushy. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be
it sounds
good.
really fun to me. If I could watch it like a movie, but it was actually a real thing, yeah, I would. I'm
Like a
down.
real thing.
Yeah, I would go backwards long before I would go forwards though, because I don't know. You know about me and technology.
Yeah.
I just don't care that much.
Yeah. Actually, the more that gets implemented, the worse you get. You're like, do we have it in the budget for a typewriter?
Yeah,
Like, I feel like
was
that's
just
what
at
we're gonna
lunch with
talk
someone,
about.
and they were trying to tell me something about Facebook and how we need to do something as a church on Facebook. And I'm like, well, you're just going to have to take this phone and show me what you're talking about. Because he goes, are you interacting as the church's page right now? I'm like, oh, yeah, I am. I'm on there. And he goes, no, you're not. It's like, oh. Okay, so yeah, send me backwards.
Yeah.
If I went forward, I would be lost
Yeah.
because I feel like I'm lost in 2023.
Do you think that if you went back and and you were around Jesus's time, he'd kind of stop what he's doing and kind of give you like the side eye, like, You shouldn't be here. Like, what are you doing here?
I think he would be happy to see me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I'd be
for sure.
happy to see him.
Oh, yeah. I would be right after that lady that touched the hem of his garment.
Yeah.
And I'm not dealing with anything. I'm just like, I just want to be, I want to, yep, for future. If I get sick in the future, let me just get a little piece of that, Jesus. But yeah, I think it would be really cool, just because we've studied so much about like his life and everything. Just, I don't know, just to even just be in a moment where he's just like walking by in the street. I'd be okay with that too.
Yeah.
Like,
See Moses, David, everything in history sounds so fun to me.
yeah, but not go watch people dig for gold, bruh. You got some issues there.
Just all that sounds fun.
No, it doesn't. Go and watch somebody dig.
They're not digging, they were panning for gold.
They have to dig it out of the ground, Scott. They don't just put pans.
Yeah, in the river.
No, it comes out of the mountains. Gold fall, dude.
I know that, but I'm
You
saying
need to
all
watch
of it
Gold
sounds,
Rush
I would want to do the gold panning.
on Discovery Channel.
Panning for gold is what I want to do.
Okay, yeah, you just
That
want
would
to
be
go
fun.
reap the benefits
I
after
don't want to
somebody's
do
done all
it,
the hard
though.
work.
I want someone else to do it, and I want the gold.
Yeah,
That's a good place to stop.
Scott wants to be a gold mine boss.
I just want to be wealthy without having to work for it.
Go
That's
get
everyone's dream.
go
though.
get the gold, guys. Like, I'm a good pep talker, and that's about it.
That's everyone's dream.
I know you don't like them, but I like our
I
mystery
hate
meat.
the
but
mystery meat so
you know
much.
why I like it? Because it's just you
'Cause
and
it
I.
makes me miserable.
Makes you miserable, and it makes me so happy because our conversation is so random,
Yeah.
and we get frustrated with each other. Can you tell me about my best friend? Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. You can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.